Yes. Yeah, well, continuing with the previous discussion, in reference to the mathematics that's discussed in your chapters, there is a mathematical aspect to the work you've done, but I think in some of the preceding chapters, um, you've actually critiqued the usage of equations in capturing the motion of nonlinear systems. You say that equations don't fully capture them in the way they ought to, and I'm an extremely strong believer of what you say. Like I've expressed my opinion in exact alignment as you've put it. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's of course many different
so
mathematical expressions in economics.
yes,
Uh, a simple textbook expression, which remains the dominant one,
yes,
is of course we've talked about that. That's an encapsulation of an exceptionally long gone obsolete worldview.
okay,
And then there has been an effort to
yes,
try and uh, let's say bring economics into the world of dynamical systems.
indeed,
And that is the whole mathematics of chaos and complexity,
yes,
which we talk about. And it's very, I have to say, in many ways, very interesting. Certainly, when I first encountered it 30 or 40 years ago, it was uh, uh, it was illuminating in important
hmm.
ways. Illuminating to understand just how unstable nonlinear systems can be,
Uh,
what the range of their outcomes
yes,
is, things like strange attractors and uh, deterministic chaos.
yes,
And I was very strongly taken with the work many years ago with Peter Alban, who I
hmm.
knew quite well, who pioneered agent-based modeling. So simple rules, and then you can see
Interesting,
how certain patterns would emerge in the data as time
yes,
as you let the system play out over time. Uh, okay, so all well and good,
hmm.
but uh, what it lacks is an ability to capture. Let's call it the organic structure
Yes,
of an act of actual societies.
yes,
So it is well short in
of,
its degree
of,
uh, let's say its grasp on uh, on the functioning of actual societies,
societies,
uh,
yeah.
of let's say the understanding of the biologist or the anthropologist.
Apologies, yes.
So in a sense that we are ourselves complicated structures with
Yes. With
specialized functions,
functioning.
which interact with each other and
Yes.
depend on each other, and uh, a, an organized society is very much the same way on a larger scale, with
Mhm.
instead of genes dictating how things will
Good.
develop, it's laws, constitutions, regulations, habits, institutional structures. But a well-functioning society has a whole range
Of
of productive mechanisms, distributive
mechanisms.
mechanisms, regulatory mechanisms, planning mechanisms, all these things. It has higher cognitive functions, all these things.
Yes.
And you cannot really read that into an agent-based model.
Modeling. Yes.
So those things are, while they acknowledge that something has fallen short
Short. Yeah.
in the neoclassical scheme of things, they don't make us give you a fully satisfactory resolution of that problem, and so that's I think characterizes my basic view of this
Hmm.
of that framework. I would add to that the behaviorists, the so-called behaviorists who are offshoot of the neoclassical economists. What do? They find out that real human beings are not like the
The equations.
textbook the textbook model of
Equations. Yeah.
so on and so forth. Well, great, anybody who thought they they were. It was just a miseducated economist. No serious person ever thought they were. So it's in some sense a an exercise in
vanity.
That's not a bad word. In vanity,
Yeah.
it's kind of self-indulgence of the economists.
But they think we are self-indulgent, surprisingly.
Yeah. And I come back to the what I was saying a little while ago about the intellectual structure, the political structure of the discipline. It is walled off from this kind of exchange with the wider world, and it has happened in a way which has become stricter and stricter over time. It's now the case that and that people will tell you this openly, that to be considered for tenure in an economics department that in the U.S. anyway, that considers itself to be top of the line, you have to have published in one of 5 journals. Out of hundreds of journals, 5 mainstream journals, 2 of which are house journals, Harvard and Chicago, have to have given you their seal of approval. And so what people do is they obsessively submit to those journals, hoping to cultivate the favor of some editor who will accept their paper. Otherwise, their careers are going to be sidetracked down the road. So no matter how much you publish in niche journals, how much you publish in empirical research journals, how much you publish in journals that are interdisciplinary, it doesn't count. It doesn't give you, it doesn't, what kind of a discipline is this actually? It's totally bizarre as an organizational structure, unless you understand that this is a way of policing the boundaries of the discipline in a serious way, and preventing the economists from having to confront the wider intellectual world.
I mean, it's a slight deviation from the textbook questions, but in view of what you just said now, were the orthodox economists more orthodox than in your years, when you were young and when you were sort of extremely clued in? Were they more orthodox than the orthodox ones now, or is it the opposite?
The quality of the orthodox economists in my father's time, or when I was an adolescent, a young professional, was much, much higher. You were talking about intellectually, people who had carved for themselves, partly by intellectual combat, an important role. And there are people for whom I have considerable personal respect and affection. Paul Sanderson was always a friend of our family. Wow. Robert Solow was not my father's friend, but he was my friend. And quite good friend over many, many years. I had a friendly relationship with Milton Friedman, not a deep one, but I appeared on his television program on the Friedman Shoes, and there was not at all unfriendly. So these were people who had range and depth, but that was because they were making their way in a world that was in which figures like my father, like Joan Robinson, like Nicholas Kaldor, like Robert Eisner, like you could go down a long list. Were Hyman Minsky were figures that they had to engage with and contend with. Now they don't have to do any of that. All they have to do is wave dismissively. And they've lost the edge. Of confronting and dealing with their critics. I don't want to single out anyone in particular, but I'll make a reference to a person who I by far in a way not the worst of these people, but and has a long career, Olivier Blanchard, who former chairman of the department in MIT and former chief economist of IMF and so forth. But Olivier, in 2008 2018, published an article in the Journal of Economic Perspective saying, well, maybe somehow we should start rethinking whether the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, the Nauru hypothesis, is really a good hypothesis. That's 2018. 1997, in the same journal, I published an article that said was much more bluntly titled "Time to Ditch the Nehru." Olivier had a piece in that same symposium in 1997. 21 years later, it's an article which is more mildly titled than mine in the same journal, and doesn't cite my piece at all. It's like it didn't exist. 21 years earlier, I'm saying more bluntly what he's saying 21 years later. And, I wrote him saying, why didn't you? Oh, he said, I didn't remember. Great. That's difficult to credit when you're dealing with a journal in which he had an article in the same symposium, in the same issue. That's not a big thing, but it's systematic that the mainstream does not cite the non-mainstream. They will go after. They will pick up a slogan, modern monetary theory, and attack it as though it's self-evident, and that it's a fringe doctrine, without ever citing anybody who actually wrote anything, without ever quoting them, without ever putting anything in a textbook. Without ever inviting anybody to speak in one of their classes, certainly without thinking that maybe they should hire someone to teach this material. They may talk about it, but only in a very abstract sense. So, I mean, you're not dealing with people who want to engage outside of their comfort zone, and that is bad for intellectual quality.
Yes.
That is really bad. It's
also damage to the common public as well. I mean, it's what's influencing policies.
Oh, sure. And I have another book which is now moved over to production at the University of Chicago Press to be out next year, which deals with a wide range of policy questions in which you have, the conventional economists have dominated this space and produced one disaster after another, and certainly one, and then you just look around the world and ask, where do we see the most successful examples of economic development, for example? Well, I suggest that we might just look at China for this purpose. It's not a bad example of a country which has, it's only a little bit smaller than India in population, and it has managed to basically obliterate extreme poverty and to develop a very prosperous and advanced industrial society over the course of 40, 50 years. Did they do this by following the diktat of neoclassical economics? I don't think so.
No, exactly.
I don't think so. Now, did they do this by following Mao Zedong thought? No, not either. So exactly where do these ideas come from? And they're largely, they have a strong element of institutionalism in it.
Indeed.
It was interesting to me. I spent a few years going in and out of China in the 1990s as an advisor to the Planning Commission, and I was struck from the beginning by the familiarity with mid 20th century American economic thought, including my father's, and including because people who were trained in that tradition and who had been in the U.S., for example, during the Second World War. When we, on the New Deal, when we ran a program of national construction, and came back to China after the revolution, was still around. So you have, and of course you have some influences from the Soviets, and you have a lot of indigenous influences in administrative state. On all of these things create something which is not at all like the neoclassical worldview. And China saw, I started going there in 93. And it was just at the time of the Russian collapse. The Russians were overrun by the free market economists.
Yes.
And they ran shock therapy and destroyed the basis of their society. It took them a good decade to begin to recover. And the Chinese were horrified by that. So at a time when in America, the Clinton administration was saying, oh, if we just open up to China, they'll become a liberal democracy just like us. I was in Beijing and the Chinese were saying, we see what happens in Russia and we are not going down that road.
Yes.
It was clear, totally clear. And they were totally right. So this is something, if you just look around at the world, you can understand that, let's say intellectual multipolarity exists.
Yes.
And the failure to acknowledge it and to spend some time studying it, become very dismissive or very hostile, is another sign of intellectual insecurity on the part of the people who dominate the economics profession.
In continuation with the book and what you just said now, I think with economics seeking reference from biophysical processes and biological mechanisms, how should the aesthetics of modeling change? Because I find that a lot of the problems with economics is the way we model. And there's a need to model. You can't just present observations. You can't just present ideas. There's a need to sort of put this entire thing into one, within quotes, cohesive framework and then present it. And there's a certain aesthetic to it. Usually a set of equations, econometrics, this and the, the usual shebang. Right. So how should that evolve? How should that change?
Okay. That's an excellent and challenging question.
Thank you.
Let me come back to I'll say, first of all, a little bit that in this book, on Entropy Economics, we lay out some examples of how you can apply a very simple framework. So for questions like what happens when two countries which were previously autarkic form a trade zone, you can make this kind of analysis, and it provides some guidelines. We would not claim that this is a mechanism which is going to give you a perfect. But the guidelines have some common sense aspects to them. For more complicated questions, what's going on in the world? I would go back. Certainly, my approach is to go back to the work that we were doing on inequality, and to realize that the first step here was to have a body of information. Let's say we're talking empirical work, we're talking numerical information. You need to have data that you can work with, of course, the problem with the inequality data was that surveys are taken sometimes and sometimes not, and their methodologies change, and the numbers that you come out with are not strictly comparable, and they're sparse and they're inconsistent and all kinds of things. Well, we came up with a way to develop measures which were dense, that is a long time series, consistent, reliable. And it's not easy. I mean, there's a certain amount of work that has to be done to make sure that you're not, making big measures. But once you've gotten the knack of doing that, you can fairly well rely on results. Well, what do we find? We found that when we got a body of data that covered roughly 150 countries over roughly 40, 50 years. So a large body of the world with measures of inequality inside each country, that you could then look at that as a single matrix and extract a pattern for the global economy as a whole.
Interesting. Nice.
Okay, so now you've got let's just call it a time dimension of the common movement of inequality. And you look at that and you say, well, what's going on in that series? The answer is there's actually a period of mild decline in the 1970s and a huge turnaround around 1980, which goes up for 20 years. And after that, it's more of a sawtooth pattern. So 20 years from 1980 to 2000. What does that align with? Here's what it aligns with the debt crises beginning in Latin America and Africa, aligns with the collapse of the Soviet sphere and with the Asian crisis in 1997. And then it peaks out at the time of the peak of the NASDAQ and the 9/11 and the dropping of interest rates. So you're looking at something which it doesn't take an econometrician to say, that's the global financial system. Introduction of neoliberalism.
Indeed.
And then you can say, well, are there exceptions? Yeah, well, sure there are. Iran, revolution in 1979, autarky after that, that's an exception. China's a large autonomous country. And while inequality does go up, it follows the pattern of Chinese reforms, not the larger economy. Why? Because China has capital controls. It's not part of the same system. And so you can say that even the exceptions help you to understand the role of these larger monetary macro forces on the world economy. So now we're coming back. So what have we discovered here? First of all, there's no separation of macro from micro.
Yes.
That these internal distributional things are in fact part of a global pattern.
Part of a larger system. Pattern. Yes.
And you take out that pattern. And
there's an arbitrary division. Like, that's annoying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So now we have an intellectual structure which says that there are large forces affecting, it's a global economy. There are large forces affecting it as the world as a whole. They include interest rates, energy prices, and then a lot of things that are specific to particular countries and so forth. But this gives you a way of understanding the political economy of the global system, and that to me is really the contribution that we made. Now, people don't want to know this because why? Because they have a model that they're starting with.
Yes.
It's called let's call it the model of the labor market. Now, what's a labor market? A labor market is a community of people who are competing for jobs. And is good influence in their theories by education and technology in that little sphere.
Boundaries.
So you can talk about the Belgian labor market.
Indeed.
It's absurd. It's totally absurd. Belgium is a geographic entity inside the European Union. It's a small piece of a large picture.
Yes.
What does it even make sense to talk about this? There's nothing goes on there that is, or very little, that's specific to the, So that's our position on this matter is that if you start looking at information sets in a holistic way and with a usable set of techniques and a body of information, you can have a research approach. Now, is this a modeling strategy?
Yes.
That's an interesting question, and I'm not sure I have a really satisfactory answer to that.
Yes.
In terms of reproducing shall we say, giving you a set of mathematical expressions that would capture,
or possibly even non-mathematical modeling, if that's.
Well, it's certainly math. It's certainly mathematical. The question is whether it's modeling. I mean, in the sense that what we're doing here is extracting information from data and extracting it in a way which enables us to understand the world. That strikes me as a useful contribution.
Yes.
Now, what's going on with a lot of people who are trying to make their living as practicing economists is that they have basically moved their conceptual apparatus down to look at very specific problems, and to ask the question: does intervention X make a difference?
It's somewhat insignificant. I mean, I know the
well,
context
I don't want to say it's insignificant.
significant,
It just
it just is.
In the development context, you have this randomized controlled trial, which is derivative, obviously, from biological experiments, and subject to the fact that in biological experiments, medical experiments, drug trials, and so forth, have the advantage that all people are essentially similar in some respects. So you try out a new medicine on a sample, and you have some reason to believe that it will apply to the larger population. But all societies are not essentially similar.
Yes.
Right. So that whether an intervention X in the development context will have the same effect in situation Y or situation Z is entirely unsure. And depends, even two communities in the same political space in the same country could be entirely different. So that's the kind of problem that you run into with that approach, which doesn't mean that you can't employ a lot of people, a lot of economists doing this sort of analysis, which they do. It doesn't make a difference what educational outcomes in Mexico City, whether you add a second teacher to the classroom.
Yes.
All right, okay. People work on these problems. But that's what they're doing there, it seems to me, is largely escaping from the fact that their discipline no longer has a viable framework. That's what they're doing. So we say, well, we'll work on some small problem that we can get a handle on, and it may not be a very general result, but it's something that we can try our hand at and use a set of techniques, difference in difference analysis, for example. That at least is dynamic. At least it is looking at changes. Yeah.
Indeed. Sure. I think this touches upon several dimensions. I mean, the problem, it's not just your answer, right, to the question. So that was interesting. In the specific context of institutions, I've noticed one thing, sir. The ideas, the notion of equilibrium, disequilibrium, even supply and demand of resource. They have their presence in biology, in physics, in biophysical processes, but I've never really seen the idea of institutions in physics or the idea of institutions in biology. So when we seek reference from these things, and how would we accommodate the idea of institution in your framework as posited by the book?
Well, I'm not sure that we have a question of the, let's say, the definition of disciplinary boundaries.
Yeah.
So what would be I haven't asked myself the question, what is the parallel to an institution in atomic physics? Is it the molecule?
Yeah.
For example, that's a question I'll have to contemplate before I give you an answer. The institutions in biology are straightforward. I mean, just try looking inside any living organism, and you will find these complementary institutions, all of which have to function together to give you a sense of homeostasis, of continuing well-being, and all of which are ultimately mortal. They're not going to last forever. So this is it's very, very straightforward once you get to these more complex frameworks. So I don't see that as a big question. I do say, I'll put it this way, the way we put it in the book, everything happens according to plans. All extractions, this can come back to the basic argument of the book. In order to do anything, you need access to resources. And you need to be able to get those resources at with a surplus that you can use. So you don't, if it costs more energy to get the oil from the ground than you can get out of it, you leave the oil in the ground. extract those reserves which are going to yield some surplus. The thing about fossil fuels, of course, is that the surplus is enormous by and large in many cases. So anyway, that's the beginning. In order to get those resources, you have to make an investment. In other words, you have to have some kind of a tool, and the more sophisticated, larger, and more efficient your machinery, the more you can, the more you can extract, or the more access you have to resources which are harder to get at. Okay, so all of that's the case. In order to make those investments, you have to have a plan. True. And the plan can be modified over time. It can be improved, but it involves a planning process. True. Now, where are the parallels there? Let's call the plans institutions. Where are the parallels? The parallels are in our genes. Yes. So we are all constructed in a certain way as a result of a set of plans that were embedded in our parents' genetic makeup. Yes. And they can be modified. We're obviously all different because the genes there's a recombination. That's just like the change of technology. Same with machinery. Machines are made according to plans, which are continually being modified and improved. And the same with societies. Their plans are, they begin with their habits, but they're also regulations, laws, constitutions. And once you see that every society is operating according to a set of plans, which are embedded in its own history and its own traditions, then you understand that there's no such thing as a universal policy. Which really puts the economics profession in a very difficult position. So for 50 years, they've been saying, indeed, we have the solutions, and there are a set of levers that need to be pulled in a certain way: privatization, deregulation, balanced budgets, tight money, the Washington consensus ideas. And right away, you can see this is applying a universal set of rules in a totally inappropriate way to societies which are fundamentally different. True. Now, what happened inside the structure of the profession? There was, let's say 40 years ago, a large body of development economics research, which was based upon people who really knew the societies they were working in. They had very specific knowledge based upon deep experience. Much of it indigenous, local, some of it international. And then the development economists come along and say, "No, we have all these solutions that you can learn from us by applying statistical techniques and randomized controlled trials and so on and so forth. And you don't need to know anything. We can go around. We can become the universal development economist specialist." Yes. Right? Good luck. Good luck with that. But that's what they did. And they went around. And of course, that's where the international financial institutions, with their battery of specialists who are trained in economics, but don't necessarily know very much about the places that they're sent to supervise or to work with. And they're coming in saying, how do you conform to thus and such a private? And of course, the answer is we don't. But the countries that have been successful are those that stuck with their own path. And maintained a degree of autonomy.
True. And a final question, sir, regarding the book, and then I have a couple of other. I mean, I just need 20 more minutes. I'll be sending you a new link. I just need 20 more minutes of your time if that's appropriate for your schedule.
Sorry, say again?
No, I just need, the meeting would end in 5 minutes. I just need 20 more minutes of your time.
Okay, go ahead. I'm enjoying myself. Ask her with now.
Right. So the essence of the approach here is the emphasis on rate of return. The idea of rate of return sort of trumping over the ideas of profit maximization, of individual consumer rationality and all of that, the rate of return, right? So how did that sort of idea occur to both the authors?
Well, I mean, that's a very straightforward piece of business common sense.
Yes.
That what an economic entity, like a biological entity, but an economic entity needs is to earn a positive rate of return, a positive profit. This is not the same thing as a maximum. A maximum is not necessarily positive. Your maximum rate of return can be a loss. You made a bad investment. You're doing the best you can do. You're maximizing crazy, but you're still making a loss.
Yes.
Then you're finished. You'll run out of reserves and you'll go bankrupt. If you are making a positive rate of return, you don't need to maximize it. And indeed, maximizing it can be damaging.
Yes.
If you are a hardware store in Florida and there is a hurricane coming and you have a supply of plywood, you don't put it out for auction and say the only people that can pay the most. Then after the hurricane's over, people will not patronize your store. You're a gouger.
Yes.
That's bad business practice. Every business knows this.
Yes.
Yeah, as I say, the only people who don't know this are some spoiled children and economists. Every parent says to their child, wait your turn, don't grab, don't take too much, play fair. This is part of the basic biology of sociobiology of survival. Why economists think that this was Milton Friedman in some sense committing an act of sophistry, almost unbelievable brazenness, and then getting all of the business schools and so forth to go along with this and to persuade corporations that what their job was to maximize the pay of the shareholders, which means the pay of the CEOs who offer themselves stock options. And what happens? The corporations are all run into the ground.
Yes.
And in a country where that isn't the case, and one can again perhaps look at China, where there's some regulation over this process. I'm not saying that Chinese business executives don't get rich; they do, but they are the business of business is the sustainability of the organization. And America lost that over the last 50 years, completely lost it, with the result that we became a deindustrialized oligarchy. It's a very sad situation, actually. So one in which I think the economics profession has an enormous burden of historical responsibility.
True. So, I mean, for my viewers, I think this book, for me personally, was an absolutely fantastic read. I think this is the first book I was able to fully comprehend in the sense of the way it was written. It was very accessible to me because a lot of the times, whenever I read older texts, I mean, it is so obfuscating. It is so, it's as though the message conceals itself.
I guess we did our job.
Yes, it was brilliantly written.
Thank you.
And it opens up a lot of questions. Right, both in the world of physics and as well as in the world of economics. So so with one stone you've hit two fruits of significance.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So I'll just send the new link. It's just 20 minutes.
Okay, send it about. Sure.
Yes. Yeah.